Alright guys, last video we discussed who to pull among all the 5 stars, but in this video, we're gonna discuss who should you pick among all these 4 stars. So recently in the version 2.1 livestream, they announced a sort of 4-star selector for the anniversary. And even though most 4 stars are pretty meh compared to 5 stars, at least if they are not supports, but in this selector, there are few characters who might be a good pickup for you. Or if you already have them all, then some eidolons might make them even better. So leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and let's get started. So first of all, let me give you a bit of context. I'll go through every character in order, give you a brief description of how that character works, and if you should pick them or not. Or if you already have that character, which eidolon you should be aiming for. So with that in mind, let's start with Gallagher. So to give you a simple explanation of how he works, well, he's a fire abundance character, so obviously he heals, but he is also a decent debuffer. His heal simply works like Lucha, where he just applies a debuff to all the enemies, and when any of his allies attack an enemy with said debuff, they get healed. It's pretty much on that line. So should you pick Gallagher if you don't have him? Well, if you are going for Akron, then he's already on the banner. So there's a high chance that you would get him from there. But if you don't, then I would highly recommend picking this character up. At this point, we all know that Akron needs debuff to get her ultimate, and Gallagher as a sustain, but also a decent debuffer, is perfect for her. Also, since his heals are flat numbers and doesn't scale of any specific stats, he can be a really good breaker as well. Now we all know that fire breaks are not that good, but the extra debuffs can be really helpful. He's pretty decent at E0, but to make him even better, there are 2 specific eidolons you should be aiming for. First is his E2. This thing enables him to be able to cleanse with his skill and increases the allies' effect res. This is the point where he actually starts to show some great value, and this is the perfect stopping point for him. But if you want to go further, then the next best eidolon is going to be his E6. This one makes him a full-fledged breaker, gets extra break effect and weakness break efficiency, allowing him to break the enemy faster. If you can't get this far, then he becomes one of the best supports for Akron. Next we have our trusty bellboy Misha. Now frankly, I would never really recommend picking this character, nor would I ever recommend building him. He tries to do too many things, but is not really good at any of those. His biggest flaw is that his ultimate, his highest damage ability, relies on multiple hits that are random. So he tries to do damage, but with his bounce hit, he can be decent against single target, but pretty bad at AoE. The same thing is with his freeze. He has a really high chance of freezing the opponent, but only if there is one. For multiple targets, that bounce ability just screws over everything. There isn't a place where he really shines, except for maybe Sim Universe, I guess. Well, if you are going for a cheese run with the remembrance path, then Misha can be pretty good for that. But outside of it, he can be a decent breaker, but that's really it. I think Herta has more potential than him, and she's even free for his notable eidolons, but I think most of them are pretty meh. A lot of players say that his E2 is really good, but you have to keep in mind that this defense shred is tied to his ultimate, which is a bounce. So it can be decent against single target, but once again, pretty bad against AoE. Everything else just increases his damage. His E6 is another one that can be pretty good if you're serious about building him. It increases his ultimate damage and recovers him a skill point when he uses his skill right after his ultimate, which can be decent and allows him to work as an SP generator for the team. Next we have another DPS who is not so trash. Xueyi. She is a quantum destruction character and is one of the better 4 stars in the game. As a DPS, she has a really unique mechanic that she can ignore elemental type while dealing damage with her ultimate. This enables her to be used against every type of enemy in the game. Her multipliers are great. She has follow-up attack that also deals really good damage, and she scales really well with break effect. I love these kind of characters that utilizes different kind of stats. Like she converts break effect into damage bonus, where she is getting the extra damage, but since she also has the break effect, her break damage also increases. And we all know that quantum break is really good, and her being able to ignore elemental type makes her super versatile. There is no other character in the game that does this, except Akron, who will arrive tomorrow. Overall, she is a fantastic DPS, has great multipliers, insane animations, self buffs, and so on. I would highly recommend you pick her up if you are a new player and don't have a wide roster of damage dealers. For eidolons, there are 2 that makes her even more goated. First is her E2. This enables her follow-up attack to also ignore elemental type, which is just such a goated ability to have. And it also gives her a bit of lifesteal, where she heals a bit after she uses her follow-up attack. Great for survivability. The next notable eidolon for her is her E6, which just makes her do follow-up attack more often, which results in more damage and a bit more healing for herself. It's not that insane compared to her E2, which is her best eidolon, so you don't have to fret over it. Her E2 is all she would ever need. Next we have another good 4 star, Hanya. Well, to put it simply, she's somewhat a budget sparkle, but if you want a harmony character that can generate a lot of skill points and you don't have sparkle, Hanya is a great alternative. She's a really good speed buffer and also increases the attack of her allies. She has a unique mark called Burden that she applies on a single enemy, which is for some weird reason does not considered as a debuff. I don't know why, but when any of her allies or herself hits this target for 2 times, you generate 1 skill point, and the damage of that attack is increased. It's a really good source of extra skill points. And before I got Sparkle, I was using Hanya with my Imbabre Lune. This guy needs so many skill points, but with a decently fast Hanya, I was able to pull off level 3 basic attack with my Lune pretty consistently. So it pretty much depends on if you have Sparkle or not. If you have her, then Hanya just loses her job completely. But if you don't have Sparkle, then Hanya becomes a must-build character for you, and you should really consider picking her up. For our notable Eidolons, well, all her Eidolons are pretty evenly distributed. Like, all are good, and neither are better than the other. Her first just makes her faster, her second one increases the speed of her allies, her fourth one can be really good. Her ultimate speed and attack boost is only for 2 turns, but with this, her ultimate's duration becomes 3 turns, resulting in 100% uptime on her buffs. So I think this is going to be her best stopping point. Her last Eidolon is just a slight damage increase, which is not that important really. By the way, if you have reached this point of the video and like what you're watching, consider subscribing to the channel, as it does help this channel grow and motivates me to make more content for you guys. Alright, now we move on to our 5th character, Guinaifen, a fire nihility character, pretty much a fire sample. She applies Fire Dot, which is a burn, with pretty much every part of her kit. The thing that makes her a bit better than the others is that she can detonate her own burns, and she applies a unique debuff called Fire Kiss, which just makes the enemy takes more damage. This also enables her to be used in places other than just dot teams. A lot of you might be planning to play her with Akron, which is not a bad idea. Like, if you don't really have any other options, you can. But in terms of her personal damage contribution, well, burn is not so great of a debuff. But there is a better way to play her than just a dot applicator. If you have seen top Guinaifen gameplay, you would know that a break Guinaifen can actually dish out a lot of damage. So if you're really planning to play her with Akron, since she doesn't really provide that much damage amplification, increasing her own damage is the way to go. For the Selector, I don't really recommend picking her up, but if you really don't have any other choice, then she can be a decent placeholder until you get a better Nihility character for Akron. For Guinaifen's notable Eidolons, well, similar to Hanya, all are decent. Like, every single one of them increases her damage one way or another. Her E2 and E6 are a nice example of that. Her E4 can be a good utility Eidolon, as it does give her energy, which makes her ult more often. And her detonation is in her ultimate, so it's a nice upgrade. The most amount of damage increase she gets is probably from her E2. The 40% damage increase is huge. It doesn't increase the dot damage, but well, Fire Dot already sucks anyways. This increases the raw damage of her skill, which is really nice, and can be better if you are planning to use her with Akron. After Guinaifen, we have another dot character, Luka, which is again should not be played as a dot character. He is best played as a breaker. Physical break, that is bleed, is incredible because it deals damage based on the enemy's max HP, which can result in some pretty insane numbers. Also, his attack deals really high toughness damage, kinda like Su Shang. So if you're struggling with physical enemies, Luka can be a really good option for that. I think even now, most of the player base doesn't know how insane break effect builds are. Characters like Su Shang and Luka with proper break builds can dish out tons of damage. Luka takes this a bit further with his own detonation. Similar to Guinaifen, Luka can also detonate bleeds. In terms of damage output, Luka can dish out a bit more damage than Guinaifen. But then again, Guinaifen does have that fire case utility. Luka is also really skill point efficient, making him pretty versatile to be used in most teams. If you are looking for a physical breaker and you don't want to play Su Shang for some reason, then you can pick Luka. One other thing that makes him better or worse depending on how you look at it, his Eidolons are pretty much useless. Like, even his E6 is not that needed at all. At this point, I would recommend picking an Eidolon for any other DPS character. This is pretty much bad for someone who has extra Eidolons, but it's also good as well, as even at E0, he's pretty much a complete package. Overall, he's a decent character who can be really good for dealing with single target bosses, as they will have high HP, and because of that, Luka's bleeds will do much more damage. Now for our second to last character, we have Lynx, a 4-star quantum healer. Well, for context, she's already a free character that you can get from Forgotten Halls, so it's not about if you should pick her up from this Selector. It's more so about if you should go for Eidolons. The thing that makes Lynx great is the fact that she has tons of utility, more than even some 5 stars. Her healing is already pretty massive, and she has the unique buff in her skill called Survival Response that increases the max HP of her allies. That is great for HP scaling characters. Not just that, if that ally is a destruction or preservation character, then she also increases their aggro, which is huge for characters like Blade, who wants to get hit constantly. She also has AoE heal and cleanse in her ultimate. She's just a full package of really good utility stuffed in one character. And if you haven't built a Lynx in your account, you should really consider doing so. For her Eidolons, well, it's pretty much opposite to our previous character Luka, where every one of his Eidolons were pretty useless. For Lynx, every single one of her Eidolons adds more utility to her already great kit, or even just increases her healing, Her E2 is a great one, as it gives 110 immunity to her skill. That means when she applies survival response to any of her ally, they will resist any crowd control debuff for one time. It's like a cleanse before the debuff even get applied. Her E4 is the only one that is pretty meh, giving a bit of attack is good, but she's mostly paired with HP scaling characters or bruisers. Finally, her E6 is a massive buff. It increases the max HP buff from her skill, and now she also increases effect res, which is even better. Overall, I think her E2 and E6 are the better ones, but all of her Eidolons are great at the end of the day. Finally, for our last character, we have Yukong. And here's a hot take. Yukong is absolutely trash, well at low investment. Let me elaborate on that. Her main role is to increase crit rate and crit damage of her allies. The sheer amount of stats she gives from her skill and ultimate is just insane. The only downside to this is that she drinks skill points like crazy, and it's really hard to speed tune her. Normally you want to make sure that she goes just before the DPS, but it's really hard to make her work that way. And she always needs to use her skill, which sometimes leaves no skill points for the DPS, and if she doesn't use her skill and leaves it for the DPS, well then she's just useless. This gets a bit easier with her Eidolons. Well, all of her Eidolons are pretty decent, but the one that makes the biggest difference is her E6. This makes her rotations much easier to pull off. It makes it so that whenever she uses her ultimate, she gets one stack of roaring boasting, which just gives the crit buff to all her allies. So with this, all she needs to do is to use her ultimate right before the DPS, and they get all the buffs. You don't need to speed tune her. Of course, you can't really ult with her every turn, so it is pretty inefficient for the long run, but no one uses Yukong for drawn out battles. Her best place is with speedrunning or zero cycle teams. So if you are interested in that, you can go for her, and even then, I would only recommend picking her up if you are like at E5 and you are missing that one last Eidolon. Only then you should pick her up, because before that, she's absolutely not worth it at all. So finally, after going through all 8 characters, and most of them are pretty much on the better side, the one character that holds the most value is gonna be Gallagher. Even if you already pulled him from the Akron banner, getting extra Eidolons are always great for him. This character holds way too much potential to pass up. For a close second position, Xueyi, Hanya and Lynx are great options as well. All 3 are awesome at E0, but gets even better with Eidolons. Apart from these 4, the rest are just not worth it in my opinion. Either they are way too niche or hard to play. And that's gonna be it for me. Do let me know what you guys think about these characters. Do you have them built, or just straight up left them unleveled? This video was more catered towards new players who don't really have much knowledge about these characters, and I hope this video helped with that. Alas, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.